I'm joined now by the Minister for Housing, Clare O'Neill, and Shadow Minister for Housing, Michael Sukkar. You're both very welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
O'Neill, first of all, if these new housing policies of yours that you've announced this week are so good, why didn't you put them in place 3 years ago when it was obvious we had a first home ownership crisis?
Sarah, we arrived in government after a decade of the coalition very directly ignoring the housing problem. And from those ashes, we've built the boldest and most ambitious agenda an Australian government has had on housing since the Second World War. That was before the big initiatives that the Prime Minister announced on Sunday. So the answer to your question is we have just implemented a massive agenda already in our first term. Our second term will be going further on housing, much further, with the two initiatives that you announced there. Let me just finish by saying this brings our agenda to a total of $43 billion. We are, investing an amount that matches the size of this acute social and economic problem for the community.
Just on this issue, though, because there has been criticism of both of you for over the nature of these policies, that they both drive demand, yours more than yours, but nonetheless, the security guarantee for mortgages is not something that you came up with last week. The point is, if you had brought it in earlier, we'd know already whether it has a perverse impact on price or demand.
Yeah, so just quickly stepping back, one of the game-changing announcements the Prime Minister announced on Sunday is that our government will back in every young person around the country to get into their own home with a 5% deposit. That policy was already in existence, and in the time that we've been in office, it's gone from 10,000 places when it was started under a Liberal government to 50,000 places today. We're talking about giving it broader expansion. So if I can just be really clear with everyone at home, we've brought the Commonwealth from a position where effectively the former government had washed their hands of this entire problem, and we are now in this incredible position of leading the nation on housing. And we're going to do a lot more in a second term. This is critically important work for the country and something that my party firmly believes should be at the centre of government.
Now, Michael Sukkar, I'm sure you don't think that you washed your hands of the housing problem, but let me ask you this question first of all, because life, as we know, is much easier for politicians if they don't have targets, if they don't set targets, if they're just aspirations. So will you commit to the government's certainly ambitious, but target nonetheless to build 1.2 million homes by the end of the decade?
Well, the government is falling 400,000 homes short.
That's not right. I think we're not going to do all the fact checks, but Master Builders says it's 166,000, so let's stick with the facts.
Well, the HIA has said it's nearly 400,000. The UDIA has said it's over 300,000. So there are, on any measure, they are falling short. And to go to Clare's point, the problem with Clare making the point that Labor is rescuing a situation on every...
Just go back. My question was, will you... Life is easier for politicians if they don't set a target, because that means that there's not as much scrutiny. Will you set a target?
I think life is easier when you set a target that you know you're not going to meet, which is what the government's done. On any measure, they're going to fall hundreds of thousands of homes short.
Well, that's not
We'll deliver more homes than the Labor government, just like we did in the last coalition government. Because the problem for Clare is this, Sarah.
Yep.
If on every single metric, housing has gone backwards on her watch. We have fewer homes being built, fewer homes being approved, fewer homes being started, and we've got fewer first home buyers.
Do you think it would be fair? Let me just bring in the audience, if I may. Let me just bring in...
And may I add
that
whilst that is happening, Labor had the genius idea of bringing in 1 million migrants over 2 years.
All right,
with no idea where
hold
they were
that thought
going to
before
live.
the audience gets snowed, because it's not fair on the audience to bring in too many ideas at once. Isn't it incumbent on you as the Shadow Housing Minister to talk about the reality of the situation that this government walked into in terms of where housing starts and finishes were up to after COVID?
Well, they were significantly higher.
No, that's not right. Sorry, that is not right.
No,
we're not going to argue.
They are 30,000 short of what the coalition.
That's not right, Michael.
They are ABS statistics.
I think the Liberals have gotten away with quite a lot over the last 3 years.
You both have to stop. One second. No, I want you both to stop for a minute, OK? Because the one thing we can't do here is win by shouting about numbers. There is a reality about the post-COVID situation. Let me come back to my question to you so we don't get into a row about numbers, which is, you say you're going to build more homes than Labor. Labor have committed to 1.2 million. So how many are you going to build?
Well, Labor are not going to build 1.2. That's the point.
But how many are you going to build, Michael?
Labor are delivering fewer homes than the former government. In fact, under Clare's watch, we're delivering fewer homes than we've had for well over a decade.
Well, that's absolutely untrue. Again, Michael, please tell the truth.
It's actually getting worse on Clare's watch. Now, the reason why I think housing is such a salient issue in this election is because the failure has been so catastrophic.
Let me just come back to that simple question. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but will you set a target? You say you're going to build more. What is the number?
We'll build more homes than Labor. I think there's no doubt about that. We'll, if we're given the great honour of forming government, there will be a lot of a big mess to clean up from Labor, and we'll make that assessment at the time. But what I won't do is be dishonest like the Labor Party and make commitments that we just know they're not going to meet.
Let me go to the question about the policy that you brought in to build homes for first home buyers, just on a timeline, because you have been prepared to make a target. It's true that the target is unlikely to be met, but you might get somewhere towards it. What's the timeline for building homes? When will people get into those first home buyer homes?
I'd like to respond to the minutes of mythology that we just heard over here. We're not building fewer homes.
Okay, the one thing we can't argue, listen, you two, we're delighted to have you, but we bear in mind that we're doing this for an audience, not just ourselves. We're not at the pub.
I'm just a bit frustrated. We're 2 weeks from an election, and I'd really like people to use the actual facts. There is truth and there are lies in this debate, and it's absolutely clear that we arrived in office to find a smouldering mess on housing, because for most of the time the previous government were in office, they didn't even have a housing minister. For 6 of the 9 years, they had no one tackling this chronic problem for the country. No wonder they underperformed so badly. But let me come to your question.
Yes.
This is an 8-year program.
Yes.
We will begin, if we win the election on day one, we will start to sit down with the states and identify sites and development plans for these plots of land, where we will build 100,000 homes around the country directly to be sold to first home buyers. In the following year, we will begin the expenditure of money, and people will move into new homes in the year that follows that.
Just explain that, because a house or an apartment takes approximately 3 years to build. How can you get people in the next year?
A detached house, you're looking at somewhere around it can take more or less, but around 12 months, maybe perhaps a bit longer. An apartment building in Australia takes about 3 years. So obviously this will be a mix of different types of developments, but what we've said we'll do is start to spend money in the 26-27 year, and then in the year that follows we'll have people moving into homes.
So Labor's going to have a stunning form reversal on building homes. Can I say to first home buyers, if you're going to wait for the Labor government to build you a home, you'll be waiting a very long time, because we're at the end of the first term of a Labor government, and they're yet to deliver a single home.
Well, that's also not true.
Let's hold that thought, because we're going to come back to that.
Come on to the 7:30 report and just make it up. You can't come on and just make it up,
Let me handle it. Michael,
I can't believe the gall of the Liberals to come onto the show tonight.
I'm going to ask you both to stop talking, or I'm going to move on to the next topic. Right? Sure. I'm going to ask you a question, Michael Sukkar. Sure. I understand it's frustrating. You both have big policies. You have announced a huge array of policies in your time in office.
I also try to tell the truth.
It's frustrating. Let me ask you a question. You've brought out a new policy. This is your tax offset for mortgage interest payments. Yeah. It's been rejected multiple times by senior Liberal colleagues. Why did you ignore that wisdom this time? Was it because of a faltering election campaign?
It hasn't been rejected by anybody, Sarah. The first home buyer mortgage deductibility scheme which we announced, I've been working on for a very long time, and it's been something, I must say, if you speak to colleagues... A number of your Liberal colleagues have said in the past that you shouldn't mix tax with housing policy, including Peter Costello. I don't think anyone has referred to mortgage deductibility for first home buyers in the past, because it has not been a topic of conversation. Well, it's now being roundly condemned by analysts in the housing area, every economist that I've seen in the last few days. So, well, I disagree with you, because the HAA, the MBA, the UDIA, the largest housing bodies have all come out roundly supporting it. First home buyer advocate groups have come out supporting it, because what it does, Sarah, is address one of the biggest issues for first home buyers, and that is they can't service a mortgage, and particularly living under the cost of living crisis with rents rising by 20%. If you're a renter trying to save, it's extraordinarily difficult to ever get the finance to buy a home. We understand first home buyers are under a lot of pressure. Let me put it to you like this. Can I just say, for a couple on average full-time incomes, they will save $55,000 over the first 5 years in their own tax that they can use to repay their... So the criticism that the analysts have brought forward in the last few days,
fervent criticism. In fact, some very strong, unusually strong language has been used about the policy, saying that it will juice up demand and push up prices. Have you modelled what kind of price increases it could cause?
I think it entirely ignores one aspect of the policy.
That's a straight question, though. Have you modelled what pricing increases?
Let me answer, because I think it's based on a false assumption of the policy. Our policy only applies to first-home buyers who purchase a new home. So by definition, it only applies to first-home buyers who are adding to the housing stock of this country. We're not giving a tax incentive for first-home buyers to go out and fight it out amongst themselves for existing housing. We're actually incentivising them to increase the housing stock of this country, because one thing that I'm sure we can all agree on, that have followed this industry closely, in Australia, a house typically doesn't get built unless someone pre-commits to do it. So you either buy an off-the-plan apartment, you either put a deposit down for a house and land package. Yep. We are incentivising first-home buyers to add to the housing stock.
I can hear the economists of Australia howling, but let me just move on.
Can I make a quick response?
I'm just going to move on if I could. Because I want to talk about a subject that's very important to Australians, and it's particularly important to many, many women in Australia facing the prospect of homelessness in the latter part of their lives. This is on the subject of social and affordable housing. There's been a hollowing out of supply over years of social and affordable housing in Australia. You've said you want to abolish the Housing Australia Future Fund brought in by the government to provide funds for building social and affordable housing. What will you replace it with?
Well, we will fund directly social and affordable housing, just as we did in government. I mean, Clare criticises the former government, but she's inherited Housing Australia, which was a creation of the former government, where we put community housing providers at the centre of the entire provision of social and affordable housing.
How much money and how many houses?
Well, we will deliver, I can assure you, as much as is coming out of the HAF, because Clare talks about $10 billion, but we know it's not $10 billion. $10 billion has been put into the Future Fund with the returns. Now, there are reports in the AFR that the fund is in trouble because of the huge drops we've seen in equities over recent days.
Let's not get into the architecture of.
We don't think social and affordable housing should depend on returns from the stock market. We think governments should fund that, and we'll directly fund it, as we always have.
By how much, and how many houses will you build?
Well, we'll continue Housing Australia, we'll continue the Affordable Housing Bond Aggregator, and we'll find ways of just directly funding social.
No one's heard a number yet from you, Michael Sukkar. You say you're going to do it. We know how many houses you built while you were in government in that area. It was a few thousand, but
it wasn't a few thousand. Sorry, Sarah. I'll get my chance, but I'll correct the record on that.
Let me just get. I'm going to ask you one more time, and everyone is listening to me ask this question.
Sure.
How many social and affordable houses will you build?
Well, we will fund social and affordable housing.
All right, that's it. You're not answering.
Not getting an answer. You'll get an answer out of me. We've got an acute shortage of housing around our country, but particularly in the social and affordable housing space. For those of you at home who are wondering why there is growing homelessness around your suburb and your town, why we have an acute problem with women not being able to leave violent relationships, why we have an extraordinary issue with older women being our biggest growing group going into homelessness, all this comes back to an acute undersupply of social and affordable homes. Now, our government has come into office. We are building 55,000 social and affordable homes over 5 years. 28,000 of those homes, Michael.
What would your mother say, hearing you interrupt her?
I've been interrupted the entire time, Sarah.
Just please.
It's okay. I'm unflappable, Sarah. I've done this my third run at this week. 55,000 homes. We've got 28,000 that are in construction or development right now. Now, I really want to correct the record on this, because Michael said in the press club this week that under the former government they built 13,000 social and affordable homes. Absolute garbage. I fact-checked that over the last 24 hours. The total number of homes that the Liberals built in the 9 years that they were in office under Liberal programs is about 350 homes.
Do you want to come back on that? Because that's not the number I have.
Yes, no. And I will.
It's just utterly incorrect.
No, it is. And I would invite journalists around the country who are listening right now to come in and examine the record. It is fine to go, for Michael to have gone around the last 3 years telling fibs about this. We are 2 weeks from an election campaign, and it is time for some accountability.
Right, we will
I think
undertake.
Sarah disagrees with you at the very.
I think we're going to undertake to fact check that. But in any case, where we stand is that you're not giving us a number.
Well, I will just respond to that because I said in the press club yesterday that through the Affordable Housing Bond Aggregator we'd supported 13,000 homes. I was wrong.
Sorry, did you build 13,000? Did you build 13,000 homes?
It was actually higher than I actually was more conservative than what we actually delivered.
Yeah.
And the affordable housing bond aggregator, Clare, your government has benefited from because it continues to this day.
Well, unlike the Liberals, we don't go in and trash things that are working.
All right, let's move on.
I'm not criticising the policy, Michael. What I am criticising is you bending the truth. No, you should know the numbers. You should know the numbers, my friend.
Well, we're going to...
we're going to fact check
homes than the former government.
We're going to fact check
you. If you would,
homes than we were.
If you would, we are not in a public house.
Wow.
Let's move on. Let's move on. We're going to fact check all of this, and we'll publish it.
I would welcome it very much.
That's it. I want to go on to the fraught topic, especially for Labor, of negative gearing. Now, were you involved in the decision to ask Treasury or any department of the federal government to look at and provide advice on what would happen if there were changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax?
Well, the Treasurer's talked about this.
Yes.
This was his request to the department to look at this. And
were you part of that decision?
Sarah, I'm not going to get into the details of it, but what I will tell you, Sarah, is that I think the real outrage here would be that a government didn't look at every option given how bad things are for housing in our country today. And indeed, we know Malcolm Turnbull revealed today that the former Liberal government looked at the option too. You know,
Adam Bant told us on this programme that he's willing to negotiate on his very tough position on negative gearing.
Well, Adam Bant can negotiate all he wants. He will not have a negotiation partner in Labor, and the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear about that.
All right, I want to move on to the topic of workers. We don't have a lot of time left.
Labor's itching. They are itching to abolish negative gearing. We had the Prime Minister lie to the Australian people last night by saying that the Treasurer...
But you were a fan, weren't you? Do you still think it's a good idea?
The Treasurer hadn't looked at it.
Yeah.
And then today
all the rumours are that Michael tried to do it as housing minister.
Well, it's actually... Hold on. Let me...
That's utterly false.
So Malcolm Turnbull is lying because he put it in his memoir.
That is utterly false.
Can I just explain that to the audience? Malcolm Turnbull said in his memoir that you and Scott Morrison wanted to...
Absolutely false.
Change
absolutely false.
Negative gearing.
That's a fiction.
Malcolm Turnbull's lying.
But we're talking about what happened in this campaign. We had the Prime Minister stare down the barrel of the cameras and tell Australians that the government had not asked for this work to be done. And we see the Treasurer today concede that they had. They are itching to do it. Clare, in the lead up to the 2019 election, was arguing favourly in favour of abolishing negative gearing. She's now the housing minister. The Prime Minister arguing fiercely in favour of abolishing negative gearing. I think the minute the Labor government thinks they've got an opportunity to do it, or if they're in government with the Greens, they will very happily do it.
We have landed at the point where I have to finish, and we'll go to the pub afterwards and carry on. Michael Sukkar, Clare O'Neill.
Great to chat, guys.
So much.
Brave attempt. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.